Hey guys, today was my dynamic effort squat and deadlift session, and I'm not going to cover a lot about bands or dynamic effort work because I've previously done videos on both of those, and I'll link some of those down below in the description. Alright, this is just a warm-up set. My first lift is the low box speed squat. You'll notice I have my sexy deadlift socks on, and you will also notice that my box is set several inches below parallel, so this is a low box squat. Okay, you'll notice that I get tight on my setup on this very much like I do on my max effort squats, and even though this is still a warm-up, I get set really tight under the bar. Obviously, I'm low bar squatting. You'll notice I set my hips and everything back, and I sit back, not down. You want to minimize knee travel, and look at that squat booty. Down, explode, and it should be as fast as humanly possible on speed work. Okay, this is my first real work set. Same thing, set up tight, get under the bar, walk it out, and you'll notice that the bar is actually bending at the top from the bands even though there's only 110 kilos on there. So it gives you an idea of how much tension is up at the top. Get set back, sit backwards, and you explode up as fast as you possibly can. Now one of the things you're going to notice with this, my speed work is a little slower than I might like, but I'm in the final wave of a 3-week wave right now, and so next week I'll end up dropping the weight down slightly so my bar speed will go back up. And also, because I'm in the final wave, I only did 9 sets instead of 10 sets on this. And sometimes I go as high as 12 in the first week. So this is only going to be 18 total reps. One of the other things that you'll note too when I'm at the bottom on these doing this speed work, that there is still quite a bit of tension on these bands. So I try to keep at least 10 kilos of tension at the very bottom, if not a little more, when I set up the distance between those bars. And at the top, it's going to be a lot. There's probably an additional 70 or 80 kilos, if not more, at the very top of this because of how hard I'm stretching those bands. So it's probably close to 170 or 180 kilos at the lockout. So that's a very, very steep acceleration curve, and you'll notice that the bar snaps and actually flops when I get to the top because of the speed at which I'm moving it. Because again, the point of speed work is to create kinetic energy and force, and you're trying to move it as fast as you can, and people forget that when it comes to force generation, if you increase the speed 50% of an object, you double the kinetic energy. So it's actually the equivalent in terms of force generation of moving a weight twice that weight. So actually you'll notice I'm actually working with, without the bands, 50% of my 1 rep max. But then with the bands, that changes the entire curve completely. Now when I start showing you guys next week my speed benching, you'll notice on the speed bench I drop extremely fast and reverse it right off the chest to engage a harder myotatic reflex with the use of the bands for faster eccentric. But you can't really do that on a box squat, because if you hit that box hard and reverse it, you're actually going to injure yourself. You always have to have a soft touch on the box. But the advantage with a box squat is that you can hold a myotatic reflex a little longer on a box than you can off of a free squat. So you can still get some of the benefits of it, but it's never going to be as strong as you can on a free squat. Also, you guys might have figured out by now, I don't ever go over 2 or 3 reps on any sort of squat. And when I initially rebuilt myself after getting out of bed, I did mostly 5x5s on squats to rebuild my thighs. And for a short period of time, I was going up to 8 reps on front squats, but I dropped those back out, and I only did those about 6 weeks. And I managed to build myself up to 29-inch thighs. And again, a lot of the people notice in my videos the size of my legs and my thighs when they see me laying down, particularly in the shorts, and I've done that purely with low reps. I do not do high rep leg work. I have never had to do high rep leg work in order to build huge thighs up. It's not necessary for me. Now some people it might be, but for me genetically, I've had my thighs up to 31 inches fairly lean as a big bodybuilder without going over 5 reps on my leg work for the most part. But the overall pattern you will see on these 9 sets is that it's a controlled eccentric. I sit down fully onto the box till the hips release and then explode up with starting strength and then develop as much speed strength as I can to fight against the bands and to keep accelerating all the way to the top. And you actually have to develop a lot of speed when you're doing band work in order to keep any speed generated through the top, because they will absolutely slow you down unless you continue to generate more force as you go. Whereas with a normal bar, that simply doesn't happen. You can generate less force and continue to accelerate. But with a steep curve on bands, you simply cannot do that. So they train you to accelerate with maximum force all the way through a lift to the very final few inches. Okay, up next I have my speed deadlifts, and I'm not using a really heavy weight on these. This is actually well under 50% of my max, but the band tension, because of the way the bands are doubled over, is so heavy at the top that this is actually difficult for me to overcome at the top, pulling at the speed at which I'm going. Now, something else I do on this, I don't use any sort of special grip on these, so in order to work on my grip strength, one of the things I do is that since I do these every week, I use a double overhand grip. And I actually have to re-grip the bar sometimes down there at the bottom like I did on that set, because it almost pulls out of my hands due to the bands at the top because I'm using an inappropriate grip. And so that actually helps me to build my grip strength. And I've noticed that right now I can do band work on max effort work using a proper mixed grip, and I have no trouble at all holding it at the top. And it's little things like this that I do that help build up my grip. Now also you'll notice, because of the explosive nature of this, that you really have to be careful doing speed deadlift work. And some of you guys might not like my form of what I use on these, but it's what works for me, and I have developed very, very strong erectors and core so that I can get away with this with no real negative load on my back. But you guys might want to use a different technique if you're a little less advanced and you don't know your body quite as well, because the velocities that you're moving with on a movement like a deadlift, these really can turn into a back snap if you're not very, very careful and you do not have perfect form when you're doing speed pulls like this. So just a word of caution there. Alright, up next I have, this is the only real accessory I'm going to do today, and I'm doing reverse band good mornings with a safety squat bar. And this is one of my favorite movements because it adds more thoracic erector than you would normally get. And this movement is just amazing for building both power and hypertrophy in your thoracic erectors, spinal erectors, glutes, hamstrings. And this is one of my primary movements. I do this a minimum of once a week, if not twice a week. So this is a major, major movement for me. And here I move up to my normal work weight, which is 200 kilos on these. Now, again, that's with a reverse band, so I'm not taking the full weight other than close to it at the very top. And normally I was doing for a while sets of 5 with these with about 350 pounds without any bands. But I've started using bands and chains exclusively on them. I don't use straight weight on this lift any longer. But again, this is another lift that you really, really have to pay attention to your form when you start going heavy on, because there's not really a lot of margin for error on this, because again, look at the way that I'm bending over. You're putting your back at a weird position, and if you have anything wrong, it could become problematic very, very quickly. You guys can kind of see my overall thickness there, and I'm going to get a lot bigger, guys. I'm still growing in my recovery. But again, you kind of get the idea looking there, is that when I hear people talk about low reps not being able to induce large amounts of hypertrophy, just strength, I simply don't know what to say to these people other than clearly they don't understand the human adaptation process, and clearly they don't know very many powerlifters, because other than bodybuilders who use shitloads of insulin and IGF-1, I don't really see bodybuilders who are bigger than powerlifters. And in all honesty, when I look at the actual guys who I know are legitimate natural, more powerlifters I know are actually bigger than the bodybuilders. But I'm not going to make that argument. And there's my back. I'm a fat powerlifter, but I still have a V-taper. So again, so much for this idea that doubles and triples don't build size. I don't do high rep work for my back at all. That is purely from heavy rowing and heavy deadlifting. And for a little while I was doing greasing the groove on chin-ups, but I've dropped that back out. Alright, again, you'll notice on these good mornings, though, the eccentric is very controlled. There's a slight bend in the knee, but not a whole lot. Very controlled. I touch the pins and then I explode up as fast as I can. So this is still used as a power movement because I'm doing very explosive, very heavy triples. So something like this that some people would consider to be an accessory or secondary movement, I am actually using as a power movement. A lot of power lifters do, and particularly the guys over at Westside Barbell. And I happen to be using their system at the moment. And this is my final set. This is my fourth real work set, and 5 if you want to count that other one with 20 less kilos on it, which still contributes to overall workload. That's something people forget sometimes, that ramp up sets and sets that aren't really optimal, they still contribute to overall workload. They still recruit a lot of muscle fibers. They can still induce even metabolic fatigue to some extent. And it's your cumulative workload that really is going to determine your total adaptations from a workout. It's not about what has happened in just one single set or only in your heaviest sets from the session. And I think that's something that people forget oftentimes. And once again, I'm doing these band crunches, standing band crunches. I covered this in my max effort squat and deadlift video from a couple weeks ago, so I don't really need to cover again what I'm doing with these, but I will caution you guys that these are not for beginners. If you do not have a strong core, or you know you're potentially prone to hernias, or they run in your family, don't do this lift. Find something a little less aggressive. This is very much a core movement for advanced lifters. Overall, I was really happy with the session. Everything went as expected, but a dynamic effort session should always go as expected because nothing is maximum weight, nothing is near failure, and even my accessory work, I can do triples with heavier weight than I used on those good mornings. So again, that's the whole point of dynamic effort work. You're training your speed strength, your starting strength, and then you're doing some extra volume on your accessories to work on weak points or performance elements that you want to improve. So I hope this has been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.